Good. It is now my pleasure to introduce Maureen Smith, who will be providing us with an update on the growth and impact of the Patient Advisors Network, the PAN, and patient partnership in the learning health system. As many know Maureen, she fulfills many roles within OSU, and she's also on our board of directors. Maureen, please.
Thanks, Dean. Welcome to the afternoon. After a stellar morning, this is going to be tough to follow, but as Dean said, I'm on the board, and I've been involved with OSU since 2017, so it's been a little bit of a time. So, you know, it's customary to do this celebrating at the 10-year mark. So we've assembled 3 people whose work with the Patient Advisors Network, known as PAN, much of it on a volunteer basis, especially in the early years, is a model for collaboration and has advanced patient-oriented research in Ontario and nationally. So they will introduce themselves when they come up, and it will be Annette McKinnon, Elise Mabey, and Sandra Holdsworth. I'm hoping that this session will serve as a springboard to conversations on the types of partnerships that are essential to the success of patient-oriented research and patient-partnered research in Ontario. What do you think these partnerships will look like in the next decade, especially in light of the focus on learning health systems? So we've set it up as a fireside chat. There's no fire though, but brief presentations followed by a moderated discussion. And you've probably noticed that we've got a womanelle here, which is fitting, given that these 3 people fit the typical profile of the people who had the privilege of being engaged when you're thinking back to 10 years ago. That's what it was. So fortunately, patient engagement is no longer limited to this profile, and although we still have quite a way to go, and I'm sure our panelists will address this. So just before I call Annette up, I would invite anyone in our audience here who's either a patient or a caregiver or a patient partner or a community leader, if you'd like to stand up, but you don't have to, or just start waving with gusto, really would like to recognize you and thank you in this 10-year celebration. So let's see all the partners. Oh my. All right. That's great. Okay, over to you, Annette.
Let me stand here and let you through. Well, luckily we're about the same height. So thanks for the introduction, Maureen, and thanks to also for the opportunity to take part in Research Day. We're happy to talk to you about some of the ways we've seen meaningful patient engagement advance in Ontario in the past 10 years and over the history of the Ontario Spore Support Network. My name's Annette McKinnon. I'm here with Elise Mabey and Sandra Holdsworth, and that's my first emoticon. Between us, we're covering the past, the present, and the future of patient engagement and the way our personal journeys intersected in the Patient Advisors Network, which we call PAN for short. So where we were, a quick look at patient engagement 10 years ago. Back to the past. In early 2012, blogging and social media led me to a small international community of patients and caregivers with whom I had a lot in common. They also felt, like I did, that their years of experience in health, patient groups, and reading and trying to access relevant research had given them valuable knowledge. And those are connections, local connections from Mount Sinai. We made these strong bonds, and we looked for ways to be part of the health and research community. It was difficult to find any open doors, but to quote Elizabeth Warren, nevertheless, we persisted. When I heard about the strategy for patient-oriented research in Canada, I was excited and I looked for ways to get involved. To me, patient-oriented research sounded like a promise to patients. Based on a hint, I joined Patients Canada in 2015, and there I found a way to connect with active Canadian patients and caregivers. Sholem Gluberman was funded through Patients Canada for the first OSU demonstration project. When he became ill, 4 of us patient and caregiver partners, led by Elise Mabey, took up the torch to carry out the work. The early support we got from Visanthi and the ASU team and their quick acceptance of our new topic encouraged us to believe that we, as patients, could produce something of value based on our varied experiences partnering in research. The project we did was called Patients and Caregivers as Partners in Research, and the team included me and Elise with Brian Clark, who's in New Zealand, and Emily Nicholas Engel. We developed 2 sets of questionnaires, 3 questionnaires in each set, one with planning guidelines for patients and caregiver partners on how to partner on a research team, and the other one to advise researchers on ways to engage with inexperienced people, basically, as we were then. We also created surveys to evaluate the partnerships, and the tools that we produced are now on the ASU website under Patient Engagement Resources and Training. This experience gave us confidence, especially after we were rated as the 2nd most useful partnership tool in a research project. The project was done by the Center of Excellence on Partnership with Patients and the Public, the CEPPP in Montreal, and it evaluated the tools, and we were 2nd. The first prize goes to Julia Abelson. I've been associated with ASU as a patient partner since that first demonstration project, and all of us here have been members of the ASU Patient Partners Working Group, including Maureen, who's now on the board. And we've also been part of a number of ASU courses, for example, the masterclass through McMaster University and the Partners in Research from St. Mike's in Likashing. We were involved both as learners and in delivering material to others. So, thinking about the community, we went on from there to create the Patient Advisors Network in 2017 as a community of practice for patients and caregiver partners across Canada. For those who were new to partnership and hadn't yet had any experience with health in that area, and as well as for those who are already involved. We support one another and we share information. In our community, we also have a consulting practice based on our expertise and experience. You see us here at one of our formative meetings where we were discussing the ways we plan to operate and what we wanted to do for and with our patient community and ways to share our collective insights. Well, so that's a simplified version of the past. And now for a look at the present with Elise.
So thank you, Annette. Those were quite the days, weren't they? So I want to pick up the part of PAN that does consulting. PAN was honored a couple of years ago to have a contract with CIHR for 2 things. One, to provide a PAN representative who was the co-chair of the SPORE Strategy Refresh Steering Committee, Diana Ermel. And the second was to provide feedback from our community about patient partners in research. I want to just acknowledge that the work we did was resulted in a report that was co-authored by Annette, myself, Donna Rubenstein, Brenda Andreas, and Diana Ermel. Okay, so here's our report. We received 262 responses to our survey over Christmas. And it was a very lengthy survey, and we got tons of qualitative and quantitative information. People were thirsty to tell us what they thought. We also did 2 focus groups with 18 people. But one of the interesting things was that 29% of our respondents had never been involved in research, health research, but wanted to be. So these are people unknown to SPORE. From this group, we learned that not all of us may be aware that partnering in research is even something that we as patient partners can do. But we also learned if we are aware that you can do it, there was no clear route in to research. So how have we traditionally learned about research and partnering opportunities? Through word of mouth and who we know. This leads to the favored few who are called upon time and time again. And it also leads to a lack of diversity. A key theme that came out of the work that we did is the impact of the research culture on engaging and partnering with patient caregiver partners. One aspect of the research culture is that it's internally focused. Those in research do not think about how it is that people from the outside learn about and get involved in research. The research system relies heavily on researchers' individual relationships with us to find people. And this means that those of us in the know, the favored few, we make up the bulk of patient partners in research. And this lack of clear routes in really serves to exclude a good variety of people and a diversity of perspectives. So what can be done about that? We need to widen the entry door. We need to let people know, and we need to make it easier for a wide variety of people and a diversity of perspectives. We also need to find ways to develop relationships with patient partners that span projects and are not dependent on project funding. So let's look at what the research culture values. The academic world, no surprise, values credentials, PhDs, and publications. By that measuring stick, we, as patient caregiver partners, are usually at the bottom of the heap. This view often causes researchers to diminish the value of what we contribute as being less than and not quite as important. We are often valued more for our health condition than our insights and our experiences. These embedded cultural views are not usually recognized as bias, though that's actually what people called it when they responded to our survey. These embedded values potentially exclude those of us with less comfort or ability to function in an academic environment. Now let's look at the research process, the structure within which researchers work. The research process is transactional and time-bound, and that's the nature of the research grant cycles. And this flies in the face of building meaningful, long-term, trusted relationships. So what can be done? We need to park credentials at the door and introduce ourselves as human beings with a passion for what the work is. Focus on what connects us as humans. Move out of your comfort zone and look for people who are not like you. Now let's look at the context for patient engagement in research. This does not happen in a vacuum. It occurs in a multi-layered system, and yet the requirements for improvement in patient engagement in research traditionally focus mostly on individual researchers and their teams, or at the micro level. The problem with this is teams very often don't have agency to solve some of the thornier problems around engagement. The funding agencies are at the macro level. They provide training and support along with grant funding, and they also provide the criteria around patient engagement that teams must adhere to. At the meso level are the fund holders. They're usually left out of discussions about patient engagement, yet their legal and accounting policies and practices impact the mechanics of both the reimbursement and compensation, and their policies can help or hinder participation. So what can we do? We ask the funding agencies to think about two things. One, supporting the development of long-term trusted relationships outside grants and engaging the fund holders in discussions of best practices. Okay, let's talk about how we as patient caregiver partners adapt to the basic research work culture. We come from a wide range of work and social cultures, but the onus is on us to adapt to the dominant culture. This contributes to our feeling like outsiders. If those of us who are the favored few and relatively comfortable in academic settings are feeling like outsiders, how welcome and comfortable are those less privileged and living on the margins? And I will just end by saying to researchers, please recognize the cultural challenges for us, the implicit power balance, and embrace the unease of conversations with us about this, and reach out to people in communities you don't usually do, and open yourself to being vulnerable. And I'll now pass it on to Sandra.
Thank you, Annette and Elise. I'm thrilled to explore what lies ahead for the research landscape and how we can shape it together. I need my glasses. Okay, are we on slide one? Yeah. Next slide, please. The next three slides, so I'm going to read this because I'm reading from our report documents. The next three slides cover information. Introduce yourself. Oh, I'm Sandra Holsworth. I was in one of those pictures, thank you. I took that out because I figured you knew that. Okay, so the next three slides cover information from Pan's report. Okay, so we're looking at co-building the future of research. Transforming research, research requires transforming culture. The research environment needs to adapt to maintain relevance and become future-focused. To structure research for the future, we need our research systems to respond to our changing needs. As citizens and taxpayers, we, patient partners, are both personally and financially invested in research. We want to be part of the decision-making process and see research that is accountable to the people it aims to serve. We are ready and willing to contribute meaningfully across all aspects of health research systems, from setting priorities, reviewing grants, and to participating in governance. Through our partnerships with researchers, we've seen firsthand how true collaboration and co-design lead to research that is more impactful, relevant, and inclusive. Slide 2, please. Talking about priority setting, this occurs at the funding agency level within a SPOR unit or network, or even at the team level, as Elise showed. About a third of PAN members have participated in some sort of priority setting using a Delphi, a James Lynn Alliance, or other exercise. Here's a quote taken from our report. We are deeply invested in the future of healthcare and in health research, and we also want at least some research to be patient-led. Many of us have also participated in grant reviews, which can be both rewarding and taxing, especially when you receive them 24 to 48 hours before they're due. Despite these challenges, half of the respondents had done grant reviews, and many of the others were interested. Fewer than 15% have been involved on various governance committees for CIHR, SPOR, or another research organization. Most had a strong interest and felt we should be involved while raising concerns about power imbalances, compensation, and accountability. We need to be more consistent to include patient partners in research governance, like our moderator, Maureen, and I have the pleasure to be on the governance for Canadian Donation and Transplant Research Program. Slide 3. Lots to cover here. As we move ahead to the future, what I'm talking about here, as patient partners, here are areas of research opportunities from our report that our community felt were important. Let's talk about climate change and the impact on health. We should be doing more research on climate, its impact on health, and how we prepare for it. I live in Graven, Muskoka. We had the snowstorm, And just recently we had no power or internet for 7 days, so it affected me to get treatment. So we look at extreme weather events, air pollution, water scarcity, reduced food production, which can lead to heat-related issues, respiratory issues, we talk about COPD, waterborne diseases, malnutrition, and foodborne diseases, etc. Lots to cover there. Another thing is conditions with hard to manage symptoms and growing prevalence in them. We think about cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, mental illness, musculoskeletal disorders, chronic respiratory diseases, and neurological conditions. It's one of my passions. We want a prevention and whole person focus. We want more holistic or whole person focus rather than only a disease or condition-based focus. This would include looking at the social determinants of health, which I know we're starting to, and focusing on prevention, learning how to get ahead of disease, referred to as prevention versus treatment. And then we also want to look at vulnerable and targeted populations. We recognize that we need to understand and help the more vulnerable of society, especially populations not traditionally part of research. Several of us made special mention of those with mental health issues, especially our youth, and those who cannot communicate for their needs. And of course, home and community care. We want to learn more about folks at home and to have more data on home care versus long-term care. Big subject, we'll leave it there. We discussed that it would take system-level changes on the items we mentioned above. Not going to be solved in one day. And then the other thing is important, the caregiver. I have an amazing caregiver, and they should be an integral part of the system. The caregiver is the often unseen essential piece of care and support for patients within the system. Let's learn more about their role. Let's understand the differences for patients and their health comes if they have a caregiver, they have an inadequate caregiver, or they don't have one at all. And then we look to collaborate against systems. We suggest exploring integrations and collaborations between health and social services, but also between health and the education system. Let's demonstrate that this done right would lead to positive outcomes. We have a strong desire to see the physical and mental health systems come together and join with the community support systems on behalf of the whole person. And then moving across systems, another aspect to study is how we navigate the various services we use, both within the formal healthcare system and across allied health services. Not just our primary care doctors and our specialists, many of us use social services as well. We would like to see attention paid to psychological aspects of navigating across a fairly functional system of services and the impact on our health as a result. I'm just going to take a couple minutes too. If we system level concerns, one of the things is access to our health data to support our right to our data and enable the model of patients and partners coming together as partners in their healthcare plan. And then new technologies we have to talk about here. We talked about virtual care, we know all about that. Maybe a phone call isn't necessarily virtual care, but we'll work on that. But now we want to understand AI, and I have the privilege to be involved in a lot of things with AI here at UHN, especially with transplant AI. There are concerns about losing the human aspect and the replacement of human contact. It's essential to build trust and provide education for patients and caregivers about how digital technologies and AI will shape health care. We look forward to the opportunity to collaborate with you and co-design on your next research. Over to you, Elise, or Maureen.
Oh, I want to go back again. Yes, okay, so this is where we get to celebrate. And we just want to say congratulations to Asu and Vicente for leading us through 10 years. Asu supported us, as you heard, from the very start. And the PAN report shows that we still have a ways to go, but it also showed where we have these opportunities that Sandra talked about, where we can explore together. So congratulations. If you want to download our report, you can do it from this here. And I was very happy to see the report that CIHR came out with recently about the spore refresh. And throughout it, I saw threaded some of the ideas and suggestions that we had in our report. So I'm really proud of it, and I'm very proud of CIHR for listening and responding the way that they did. So I just wanted to make that comment too. It will strengthen patient involvement going forward in research. And we're done. There was a slide with a nice fireplace on it, but it's not. I'm going to move over here because I'm still blocked. Okay. So, is it on? Yeah. Okay, all right. So imagine a big fireplace up there. Didn't make it into the new deck. Okay, so we're gonna have a moderated discussion, and then I'm gonna come back at the end to tie it all into the learning health systems, because that's really important too. So and we'll have a little video at the very as the last piece. So I'm gonna ask this question to all three, and you can choose whatever order you want to answer in, but you've presented an incredible presentation, and within the time limit too, which is quite 10 years. That was a whirlwind tour. What would you say is the most significant change you've witnessed in the last 10 years of patient engagement and patient-oriented research? Go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah. So what I've seen is that I will agree that there's more patient partnership work being done. You answered the wrong question. I was thinking of something else. So what's the change? Okay, so for me personally, so when I first got involved in research, a lot of the language I didn't understand, so we had to self-learn. I'll be honest with you, when I was mostly an advocate for organ and tissue donation, and then when I got involved with research with the Canadian Donation Transplant Research Program, I sort of felt like I was thrown into an ocean. I had a lot of knowledge, and I'm more of a outside of the box kind of thinker. I have ADHD, and that to me is a benefit. And I found like at first that we were just being like asked to do a review, do something like that. But I've become to the point now where, for example, like everyone had a CV, and I looked at that and I joked because I used to work with a lot of people that have, I still do, a lot of acronyms behind their name. And so I used to joke and say, my acronyms are PSC, my liver disease, IBD, I have Crohn's, and then I put CS, common sense, and SOH, sense of humor. And they used to laugh about that, but when I looked at the CV, I'm like, I can't fill this out. Then they came up with the CV, applicant CV, and that was good. And then I went, oh, okay, well now that I have this, I'm going to ask you to co-author. I'm giving you all this information. I'm helping you do the surveys. I'm giving you insights into patients. And that was amazing. And now the most recent researches I've been doing is a narrative CV. And you guys are going to have to do this, I think, in the future. And I'm happy to have that. So I find that I've gone from, being, like would you say, like the word that they say at the beginning of the ladder there, they just being engaged, ask questions, to leading conversations, being there at the beginning. Still not there when the priority setting's taking place. Not necessarily always when the concept's coming together, but usually at the grant stage. I think that still has to change.
That's great, Sandra. That's a really interesting journey about the applications and the barriers that are there too. So, Elise? Yeah, so I have a similar experience to Sandra in that when I first started, I was really at sea, but it was an exciting journey. And then as I moved along, I became more and more involved in things like grant reviews and so on and so forth. And what I think what the change is that I've seen right now is that there's a huge recognition of us being involved there's also an acknowledgement of the value of having us involved. I think that's, in the beginning, I had to sell myself a good deal more, which is not usually a problem. And then I think what we're starting to see now is the beginning of patient partners in governance as well. So it's starting to move. We've seen that trajectory. That's great. Annette?
Well, when I started, is this on? Yep. When I started getting interested in being involved in research, I didn't see very many patients or caregivers, or even researchers who were aware of the possibilities. I was looking back at the Canadian Patient Partner Survey from 2022, which had 603 responses. And when you look at it, you can see the rapid growth, because almost 50% of those 600 people who responded became involved after 2015, which says a lot for the SPORE effort and the growing popularity and rightness of having patients involved in research. And so now we're seeing growth, and we're seeing a lot of research projects about including patients and communities. And it's also significant that now we're seeing more patients and caregivers as co-leads on research projects or initiating articles and reviewing. So then we have some influence on what gets funded. And as an example of patients as co-leads, I point out the Evidence Alliance, which was funded by CIHR for 20 more patient queries after the first 3 that were completed were so successful and so relevant.
That's great. Okay. A question for Annette and Elise. So it's really encouraging to see, PAN's Diana Ermel was the PAN representative and co-chair, let's say, of the SPORE Refresh Steering Committee. Like, that's in itself, that's a huge change, right? So when you read your great PAN's Reimagining the Research Landscape report, what were the most surprising findings from that report? Ooh, I think I'll start with that. Well, we asked about 3 or 4, maybe even more than that, questions around bias, thinking we were going to get racial bias, sexual bias, the usual things you think about bias. But what we found people responding to in that question, and the fact that we had text-based questions around that, was they were talking about the research culture. So as I said in the talk, that was the thing that was really surprising to us, because our community sees it as a form of bias. And some people would say, I don't know if this is bias, but it feels like it to me. And so that was the biggest surprise. And we had to sit down and say, how do we deal with this? What do we make of this? So that, for me, was the biggest surprise. And then I think the other good surprise, of course, was the impact that our report has had on the ultimate CIHR SPORE report. That's great. Annette? Yes.
Well, our findings in our report were based on the survey and on focus groups. And we had responses from people who were and were not members of PAN. So with the breadth of opinions that we had, we were able to make 50 suggestions around SPORE and the refresh, which is a lot. And a few that stood out for me were I've got 3 here. The route into research involvement is still a maze. There are very few patients and caregiver partners involved in governance after 10 years. I mean, I still don't feel really close to what I call big SPORE. And the advice in it to standardize compensation practices for citizen partners. I mean, I really hated invoicing all my life.
Thanks, Annette. Those are great. So I have a question just for you, Sandra.
Okay.
You're special. So patient partnerships in research have evolved, but so have the roles that patient partners play and the types of projects they become involved in. Sandra, would you share with us how you began in this world and how this has now evolved for you? Briefly.
That was a question I think I was answering earlier, but let me explain. So I'm a transplant recipient, liver transplant for 28 years. Thank you, Toronto General, UHN. And I'm currently waiting for a new liver and kidney because of the medication. Long story, you can read my bio. So I started as an advocate for promoting organ and tissue donation. And then I thought I'd done enough of that, and then I thought, okay, pass it over to other people and that, because 20 years of doing this, and I'm still doing it now, to be honest with you. I thought, well, I got to find out the research. How do we get the research, and how do we find out? Because I'm very inquisitive. I'm a very patient. I'm a patient that wants to know everything, and I'll find it. And I was finding out about my liver disease in 1996. When we didn't have the internet, but my neighbor did, right? So I went from there, and then I got involved with the Canadian Donation Transplant Research Program. Checked them out. They do amazing work when it comes to patient partners. We have it that 2 patient partners are involved in the research in that. So I advanced through there. I learned all the things, mostly about long-term outcomes, but I also learned across all themes. And then from there, I've been with them since their inception, 2014, and then they started their patient partnership in 2016. From there, I found that many of the issues that we have in transplant are related to our healthcare system. So then I thought, okay, if I'm going to do work within the transplant system and make things fix there, for example, one of the things with long-term outcomes with physical therapy, I wanted to advocate for anyone who has any kind of surgical procedure that affects their abdomen or anything, automatically is covered for OHIP, for physical therapy, when it's required. Some of it's right away, some of it's after they've healed. And so then from there, I just got involved in healthcare. I'm on the minister's PFACT. I have the opportunity to work with Patient Advisors Network on their board. I sign up for a lot of things that I'm interested in for research, maybe too many. And then from there, as I said earlier, I've gone from just being consulted to being a member of the governance team, and also now, as I said earlier, to being a co-author, and then still pushing our patient priorities that we set in 2016. I keep reminding them about that. There's research on these items we haven't covered yet. So lots of progress. I'm happy with my progress in this field.
That's amazing, Sandra, and it just shows how you can go from one small area where you start into really health systems, because it is all interconnected, and how you bring, not just the perspective of a transplant recipient, but of your entire experience in the system. So well done, and good luck with the road ahead. So I'm going to ask a question to all three. You can choose who wants to answer it if you all want to say something, but one of the things that PAN has done a really good job of is to constantly collaborate to improve patient engagement and respond to the changing landscape. And I thought your report was aptly named. So a critical component of this is to bring in new voices, especially from people and communities who are underrepresented in health research. How do you see this moving forward in the next 10 years?
So maybe I'll start with that one. So first of all, as a community of practice, we don't recruit people. In fact, we've never marketed ourselves, so people come to us by word of mouth, and our community is reflective of who are the patient and caregiver partners in Canada. So we are mostly like us. 80% of us probably are older white women. And so that's a problem. Do we change our tack and recruit, or do we find other ways to increase the diversity? And that's a challenge we're working on. I'm also a person who helped Dr. Ambreen Sayani co-initiate EMPACT, Equity Mobilizing Partnerships in Community. And that's a table of people with diverse lived experience that hears about or people bring different projects to us, and we do basically a community-based health equity assessment of their work. And so that was a way of taking my privilege and understanding how to bridge to people who are less privileged, and that's a still ongoing journey. But Ambreen and I have also had now conversations with the PAN community about equity. How do we increase the equity in our community? And that is also ongoing. So I will say that's the thing. The other thing I guess I would say is that our board is relatively diverse, and it's all patient caregiver partners. and reflective of geographic diversity, men, women, although we could do with more men, and age differences and racial differences, et cetera, et cetera.
Did you want to add something in that? Sandra? Oh, Sandra's going to chime in.
Yeah, just to add to that, so one of the things I found with, looking forward to engage with Indigenous groups or other groups that are not at the table, I always found that I don't think we're doing it right. I think we're waiting for them to come to us, and we can't be doing that. We need to go into the communities, find out who the leaders are, build trust, and then work with them within their communities. I find that we're working with Dr. Istvan Mucci, who is a nephrologist upstairs. He's trying to understand why South Asian, the African, Black, and Caribbean communities and other cultural things are not getting access. And Indigenous, of course, we've been doing work on that for a long time, but why they're not getting access to transplant. And there's history of not having trust, but these cultures do things differently. A lot of them has to be approved by the elders. So as I said, we need to go in the communities. We can't be waiting for them to come to us. And so some of the presentations today that I heard, there were communities that were mentioned. It's like, okay, we need to get involved with them and get them at the table. This is one of the things too for our Ontario health teams, because this has always been a question. How do we get these groups at our tables? Thank you.
That's great. So I'm hearing that there's still a lot of work to do, and we're all agreeable. But I work with a lot of patient groups, especially in the rare disease space, and they report the same thing, that their groups are not diverse, but there's money needs to go. You need budgets. You need money to go and reach out to communities and to do that work. And often that's a big restricting factor. So we need champions in the research community to do that with us and to apply for grants and get some seed funding to get out there and reach communities. So I appreciate that. So this is supposed to be a 10-year celebration of patient-oriented research and patient partnership. So imagine that I'm putting a very big celebratory cake right in front of you there. There might be one later. I don't know. I don't want to reveal any secrets. But imagine the cake is right there, and I'm asking you, as you blow out the candles, what one wish would you make? So you're blowing out the candles, and you're thinking about eating the cake soon. But what one wish would you make as you blow out the candles? And who wants to go first? Annette.
Well, I thought about this. I'd wish that everybody knew about patient-oriented research and our system of health research and regulation in Canada and the ways we benefit from it. We need to know what we would lose if citizen participation in research, regulation, and drug development disappeared, as is threatened in the US. I've learned through being a patient partner that the best solutions are created when you've got the whole team around the table, from the funders right down to the users. And so I'd like to see more creative ways of sharing the idea of public involvement at a non-political level.
Well, that's a big win. The cake is burnt now. The candles are all gone. Okay, Elise.
Okay, so my big interest is in system change, and I really wish to see that patient and caregiver partners are driving that change through being in governance, through setting priorities, through leading their own research, perhaps with the use of AI. And I see that we, as members of the public, or proxies for the public, are key players in system change, particularly with the chaos that we have now. And with chaos comes opportunity. So we need to get involved with policy and change management and so on.
Oh, that's great. And Sandra?
Okay. Is this working or?
Oh,
it is.
You're on.
I was going to say that one wish, but I'm going to say my wish comes from all the patient partners behind me and all those ones who want to be involved. So my wish would be that all research should be based on patient priorities and co-led by patient caregiver partners, and that there's more collaboration and less duplication of research. There's lots of research on how to do patient engagement. I'm sorry, I don't want to see any more. I want to see that research put into knowledge translation and used. The other thing is that you know, sometimes when research is published and available, so when research gets published, which seems to be sometimes the end result for researchers, I'm on papers where I can't even get access to. So that's wrong. I shouldn't have to go and say, can I please get access to the paper that I helped you write? And so that it should be available, and that, you know, when we talk about, and it should be available to all public. It should be a research thing that goes, what do you want information on? You go to it, you find out, you see if you can get involved. And then also knowledge translation, right? Like, how are we going to do that? And getting it to clinic. You talk about my experience. I'm like, when I started doing research on the importance of physical therapy, education, and mental health when it comes to transplants. It's like, yeah, of course, we need it. Let's do it. Let's implement it. Oh, no, we got to do research. That research took 10 years, and we're still working on it. But people are still suffering from not having the proper physical therapy, not having access to mental health, and they could be having more help with nutrition and diet. Thank you.
So now the cake's been eaten while you're talking. Annette and Elise had time to eat the cake. Okay, so first of all, huge thanks to Annette, Elise, and Sandra for, first of all, really importantly, I think giving us something to celebrate, but secondly, really giving us something to reflect on, and that's really, really important. We can't just sit there and say, oh, we've done great work. We really have to be thinking ahead, and you've given us a lot about that. I'm going to tie that into the learning health systems, because that's what I've been told to do. So, and how that aligns with patient-partnered research. So the first thing I think about when I think of the learning health systems and tying into patient-partnered research is the jingle. You can't have one without the other, because I really think that you can't have a learning health systems without that base and foundation of that patient-partnered research and the patient-oriented research. So I think the learning health systems is really well equipped to continue, because as we've just heard, we do have that base. My first presentation I did in the learning health systems was years ago, and I was still with the patient partner working group for OSSU, and I sent around an email, and I got a couple of quotes from people about what they thought it was about. Some of these people are here, and I put those up on the slides, and that's when I kind of referred it to as a wobbly stool, because there was the leg of the stool for the patient, public, caregiver, and community engagement. I thought was really wobbly, and as I said yesterday at the early career researchers, boy, did I ever get a lot of mileage on that one. If I had $1 for every time that was mentioned, I could afford a trip probably. So I thought that leg of the stool was really wobbly, and that it needed to be better defined and embedded. I still believe that, but it's starting to straighten out. There's a lot of work has been done in the last 3 years, especially, I'd say, and we had some presentations about that today. A lot of the people who are leading that work are here with us, and we're really, those fruitful collaborations between everyone involved in the healthcare system is what's driving that. So everyone's talking to everybody now, and that's driving it. So they really go hand in hand with that patient-partnered research. 3 main reasons. Why would we want to conduct patient-partnered research and then not implement our findings in a way that works for everyone in our healthcare system, which is what you just said, Sandra. So it just makes sense. Like, you know, in French we say le gros bon sens. It just makes sense. So secondly, the types of activities and projects that are needed for that well-functioning learning health system require different types of engagement, and with a variety of people. So for example, you know, how do we integrate all that highly relevant work of our patient and our patient and family advisory groups, or our patients and caregivers and communities and citizens involved in Ontario health teams? It's all been siloed in the past. Now we have a learning health system that recognizes the importance of the research piece of it, the quality improvement piece of it, that everybody can play a role in it. And this is really highly relevant, is that we're all experiencing a healthcare crisis. No one is immune to it. And that has really fueled that call to action. And we need to have a system where different people can engage in the system in different ways. We're not all interested in research. We may be interested in other areas, and that's opening, learning health systems opens that door. And if you only have time to fill out a questionnaire, but you know that that questionnaire is going to be looked at and acted upon, that's your contribution. And that's good, because we all want to be part of the solution. And that's been the issue, is that we haven't been seen as part of the solution. And finally, learning health systems, for me, advance the fundamental belief that we're all better if our system is based on priority setting, to you, Sandra, that includes all potential users, co-design and co-production, and it sees patients as more than data donors. So much in the same way that OSSU envisioned its strategy 10 years ago. So I kind of like to see it, a learning health system, as Culture Change, the sequel, which would be a really good movie, I guess. So, and after reading last week about some of the events in the United States where they're going to cut patient and public consultations and all of the horrible work they've done to equity, diversity, and inclusion, that should really empower, we really need to advance that work. So yesterday I had the pleasure of hosting a session for early career researchers, and I think they're all nervous because we played trivia, but there's no trivia today. I'm serious today. And I said that there were 4 words to really describe the key opportunities for patient engagement, and those are urgency, timing, support, and impact. And OSSU is well positioned to respond. So I'm going to end with this 3-minute video. It was commissioned by the Family Engagement and Research course as part of the Impact Clinical Trials modules for family and youth engagement training for their young researchers. So you'll hear from a 13-year-old about her experience in youth engagement, script and everything else entirely written by Ophélie, without any suggestions about what she told her story. So you can imagine when it came out, very touched that she's speaking about in a part of it about about a SPORE-funded project, so called Inform Rare, and in her role in the youth advisory group. So over to Ophélie. There's no better way to end this than listening to our future.
I know what I'm talking about, they always say. What they really mean is, you don't know what you're talking about. Even when I'm talking about my own life. As a teen with spinal muscular atrophy, my opinion about what is best for me is rarely taken into account by others, whether it's doctors or people I meet on the street. That has been the truth for as long as I can remember. I've always wanted to be like the other kids. I wanted to follow them around town and go to their birthday parties. But it wasn't always possible because it wasn't accessible. So I was left out. Eventually, my perspective changed. I was going to be the person that I wanted to see in the world when I was younger. I wanted to change the rules, to be an inspiration, to be someone the next generation would look up to. And then I learned about InformRare, an organization working to improve healthcare for children with rare genetic diseases. I know it can sound a little like, and then the dragons arrived. But InformRare really did have a huge impact on my life. For the first time in a healthcare setting, my opinion mattered. I am a part of their youth advisory group, along with other youth across Canada, with SMA, PKU, and EPS. We meet and discuss things like patient questionnaires and research studies. We talk about how we would change the questions to make them more clear, and create materials like posters to share with other youth about how to participate in research. We also give feedback on projects in development, like video games and media. Our opinion matters. There's never a wrong answer with InformRare. What I love about them most is they value youth. They helped me find my voice. I feel heard. I leave each meeting knowing I have made a difference by helping to create something better. It kind of makes me think of a quote from my favorite TV show. Being part of something special makes you special. And I know what I'm talking about.
Right on time, and thanks again. I can't think of a better hour to spend with Sandra, Elise, and Annette, and thanks for being such a great audience.